Hello, everyone. This is Joey Santos from worshipprogramming.com. And today we're going to talk to Luke McElroy. And I'm not going to attempt to say your company name because I can't. So
we'll give you grace. It's okay.
Exactly. It's all about grace. So Luke, introduce yourself. Just tell a little bit about yourself, your company, and what you do.
Well, I'm excited to be on here mainly because of just our friendship and the events and opportunities we've had a chance to work together on. But yeah, as you said, my name's Luke McElroy, and I work with a company called Orange Thread Media. And we basically do three primary things. We say that it all wraps under this context of live events. But we started about 6-7 years ago as a live events production company. So we'll come in and do projection and lights and sound and cameras and all that sort of stuff. Everything from production management to producing of events, both on the corporate side, kind of private event side, as well as kind of Christian conferences, retreats, services, and the works. And then we have two other brands, and so we call that Orange Thread Live. And then we have two other brands, and that's Triple Wide Media. It's basically the largest online reseller for multi-screen and ultra-wide content. And we serve about 7,000 to 8,000 customers all across the globe. And it's just an amazing thing what God's done through that community as we've partnered with, I think, some of the best content creators out there. Most of them are faith-based, and it's kind of exciting to see that all this faith-based stuff not only is used by thousands of churches every week, but it's been picked up over the years by American Idol and Blake Shelton and Dolly Parton and the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, it's kind of fun to see that stuff sort of trickle into culture and to see some of our, Christian brothers and sisters creating for the marketplace. And then the last thing that we do, which is in many ways kind of what's taken over my passion and my heart, is a conference. It's called SALT Conference. It's all about creative arts in the church. We have just a huge belief that media and technology and art, many of the things that you're talking about on your blog and through your video podcasts and all that sort of stuff, that we feel like it has an incredible role in the church today to create atmospheres that help people feel welcome, help people feel invited, and help people engage on a deeper level with their creator. So that's SALT Conference. Those are our three kind of areas of focus.
That's great. Well, we're here just to talk about your latest book, Environmental Projection.
Check that out.
Luke is also an author. He wrote a few books, and that's the latest one. And let me first ask you this. I think there's I may say this wrong, but it's a trend in churches that try to, they start seeing this big screen projections everywhere, big walls. And I think there's a tendency of people like, well, that church did this, I need to do this in my church because that's where it's going. And that's where that's how you do things now. And one thing I like about your book right off the bat is that you establish a parameter for the concept of why you do what you do.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about.
I call what you just described franchising creativity.
Yeah.
And I think it's dangerous. And I think what makes it dangerous is that when we try and be anything other than what God's called us and our own unique talents, gifts, and abilities, when we try and be anything besides that ourselves, then we're being false. And I think so often people go into churches on a weekly basis and they feel that inauthenticity. And there's something about that, because I think art, media, it speaks to the heart. It's this language of the invisible that has an ability to kind of penetrate us in a way that words and music can't. And so when we choose to try and copy or mimic or borrow ideas exclusively from other places, it in many ways can really become detrimental to our own atmospheres.
So tell me first, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I've been in the visual worship, creative arts kind of realm for several years now. And for me, when I first got into it, it was all about, it was cool, right? Like, I got to be honest, I'm here to admit, when I got into this, it was cool toys. And, I was diagnosed at an early age with one of the most amazing diseases in the world, and that's ADHD. And you can probably attest to that because you've spent enough time with me. And the moment a squirrel walks in, a room, I'm just completely distracted. And I'm even already distracted. But no, so for me, it was a coping mechanism to deal with ADHD, was to be behind something with a ton of buttons, to move faders, to punch the next button on PowerPoint or put it together or whatever. And so I got to be honest, I started doing it because it was cool, but I was just given this incredible gift. I believe God really kind of ordained it, where the two technical directors in the church that I was serving at the time, one of them was an ordained minister. And every moment we had when we were resoldering a soundboard or, rehanging lights or cutting gels or whatever, he was taking a chance to help disciple us, and not just me, but all the guys that were in this kind of tech community. And something began to formulate for me a foundational principle that art and media can, in fact, be a vehicle that God uses to reach the world. And that just started kind of brewing. And as I started getting involved in bigger productions, I started seeing this impact of what media and art can do in an immersive environment. And so all that just started kind of spinning, and I started seeing a lot of churches just doing that cool factor. And I thought, what would it look like for me to write both the most practical, all the secrets you could possibly have, step-by-step guide to setting up your own environmental projection, but at the same time, wrap it in this philosophical, biblically based perspective of why do we do what we do and what's the heart behind this? Because it's not just about doing, right? I mean, you get that in your church. Like, we don't just do things to get likes on Facebook or retweets on Twitter or hearts on Instagram. We do things hopefully so that people have a deeper encounter. And sometimes I think it's easy with technology to get that mixed up and to go, oh, that's cool, let's do it again. And there are moments that I think the cool factor works. It's okay to do things just because it's fun, because I think church is designed to be fun. But I think when everything becomes this entertainment chase, it gets really dangerous. And the reality is, you can't out Taylor Swift. I mean, you can't. She's going to have way more money, way more time, way more resources, way more access than we'll ever have. And the reality is, she may spend 52 weeks of the year planning one show that then she does for a year and a half or 2 years or whatever. We spend 1 week planning 52 different weeks, And so we can't continue that.
One thing I like about your book is that you spend the first few chapters taking us through a journey that I think is extremely important for every media guy. So every media director, media and arts director in church, I think it's important for them to understand that at some point we got to make a transition from the cool factor to a more content-driven service, a more compelling worship, and how all the lights and projection and everything. So tell us a little bit about that journey. Like, I really like the unique way you present the comparison between the sacred spaces, like when you went to Europe and you saw the and those things are, I never looked at that way until I read your book. And I was like, wow, I just realized that that's why they built those places like that. So expand a little bit on that.
I think you're alluding to the story I kind of start the book with, and that is a trip that I took to England with my dad several years ago. And it really in many ways was the catalyst to cause me to go, yeah, this is how I can write this and help give perspective that environmental projection isn't just about projection. It's not just about, as I kind of mentioned there, creating the Super Bowl on the sidewalls of your church or creating this virtual reality Broadway play. What I think happened in that trip was I walked into, so one of the things we did a lot was go into all these beautiful cathedrals. And, you hear stories over here that, well, the Church of England's dead and it's kind of moved away from its kind of Protestant Christian faith. And And so you kind of walk into these places thinking, well, I don't know what to expect. Well, I walked into Westminster Abbey, and I'll never forget, this is the story I tell in the book. And I remember just entering into this place, and I remember my head went back, my hands went out, and I just kind of, my jaw dropped. And I was like, oh my heavens, God, this is beautiful. Like, what have you done? And I immediately remember sitting there going, holy cow, I am in a posture of worship. The space, the mere environment that I'm in has just rendered me in a place to give adoration and praise to God. And I just immediately hit me and said, what do all the Western American churches like? You know, like, what are those spaces causing us to think? And how do they begin to, you know, formulate the way we worship? I talk about this phrase in the book, I think, you know, lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi. And it really is the way we worship shapes the way we believe. And the environment that we walk into every single week is going to shape the way we perceive the God we worship. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, if it's a too technical of a service, it may be that we worship this very kind of entertainment driven God. It also may be that we worship, and the perspective of God to us is that he's a very accessible God. Whereas if you walk into a church that's extremely, you know, rigid, and you got to wear a suit and tie, and it's very traditional, and you sing hymns and all that, it may seem that you worship this very kind of prim and proper God that, you know, deserves to be exalted. And the reality is both of these are true. It's just a matter of kind of what's the story that you are telling. And so I start there, and I kind of walk through this journey of what does it look like to begin to use media to tell stories in our church, and how do we begin to cultivate a community concept of art can become a vehicle. Story can be told through our mere spaces. So
that was great. And now let's get into, like, you get into the book without giving away too much. You talk about four main ingredients to set up an environmental projection in a church. Now, before I get to that, tell me one thing. What should the church look for before they make the decision? That's what we need in our church.
Well, that's a great question. And that's, you know, I kind of asked that question a little bit in the book for you. And I basically say, you know, why does this matter? And it's going to matter differently to different churches. I mean, one of the heartbeats and why I wrote the book is, even if you're a church that you kind of go, you know what, environmental projection itself isn't for us, I still think the book is worth reading, if nothing else, the first 5 or 6 chapters, because it helps give that perspective. It helps wrestle with the question of why with us. But I think that, you know, the reason we would want to put that in, and the reason why I see it be so impactful in our environments, is it really helps engage the community, the body that's in your room, that's in your congregation, that's in your worship center. I mean, I share in the book, you may remember this, a couple of diagrams. And I really kind of help paint this picture of what happened from the early church, you know, stage design setup, where the cross was the center, the altar was the center, and the pulpits were on the side, and the choirs were facing in, and everybody was leaning forward. And so the tension, the focal point was the cross and the altar. Well, you fast forward to today's church service, and it's exactly what, I mean, I don't know if when you read it, you're like, oh, that's us. Ouch. You know? And it's like, you know, a friend said, if you can't say amen, you better say ouch, right? And the truth of the matter is that environmental projection begins to take this focus that's in this very wrong place, which oftentimes lands right on the pastor or right on the worship leader. And it begins to kind of make this more of a community feel. It kind of breaks down these kind of invisible walls that live between the worship team and your congregation. It begins saying, hey, we're in this together. Like, this is a community worship experience. So I think some of that I break down, like why all that, whether you do projection or not, it may start challenging the way that you've laid out your room or the way that you position people, because all of this sort of stuff tells a story. And I just sit back and think, you know, how often do we as church practitioners and people who are trying to design and program services, how often do we question, what is someone who's never been to a church before in their life thinking the moment they walk in our church?
Yeah, it was very eye-opening to me. And here's one thing for the viewers. and I'm a worship programming pastor in my church. I don't have environmental projection.
Right.
I have one single screen right in the middle, and it's amazing how your book is still applicable, in many ways applicable to me. I don't have environmental projection, and I think that's a great thing to highlight in your book, is that you're going to learn a lot about things that go just beyond the effect of having an environmental projection, but it's really talking about the concept overall, the application of graphics and projection, and going to the point of, like you said, telling this story to everybody that comes in a church. You mentioned it's on like chapter 7 of your book, and you make the statement of like your goal is to be the paint on did I write this? To be the paint on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Not a premiere broadcast. You said that before. So tell me a little bit about the heart of the artist, if you will. Like how the media director of a church should look himself or herself when it comes to prepare and work in the content of the service, regardless what system they have.
Yeah, so I think what you're kind of talking about is this piece in the book that I really help us realize that our goal is not to become this kind of broadcast engine. We're not supposed to be, taking these, mega images and creating idols, if you will, on the screen. We're really just kind of trying to digitally repaint the walls. And I think that the role a worship director or a worship programming pastor or a technical director, or even just the people, the volunteers, or maybe staff members that are running this become is kind of worship curators. They in many ways become virtual and digital interior designers through environmental projection. So, though you don't have environmental projection installed, I know that we've worked with you to do it on kind of a special event basis. And it does have this impact level that kind of helps elevate that service. But one of the things that you and I talk a lot about is, what is the story we want to feel? I'll never forget this past Christmas when we were working with you and we did this whole Christmas song with Drummer Boy. We knew that the song had this very dark, moody sort of feel to it because it wasn't the traditional rendition of it. And we just wanted to create the scene, right? So as the song started, all these kind of columns came up in the room and this kind of deep sort of thing. And I remember you and I talking about, we want people to feel like they're in this kind of royal, ancient, sort of environment, and that they may feel the weight of like what this Drummer Boy sort of mentality would have been like in the morning, waking people up. And so we had this sunrise, right? And, people listening to me maybe going, holy cow, that's like the most artistic thing I've ever considered doing. Well, the thing is that any of us can do that. I mean, the resources exist. It now becomes, and I think a worship programming pastor or technical director or worship pastor, like the conversation needs to start shifting from, hey, what tools do we need just to kind of make Sunday happen, to what tools can we begin to utilize to really advance the use of story and atmosphere in our space. Just like we're asking the question, what songs do we think are going to most resonate with people? And we all do that, right? Like music has this way of affecting us tonally. Different notes affect us in different ways. Well, different colors, different textures. I talk about all this in the book. Like color theory is a big thing.
Yeah.
Colors that we use in our environments are going to shape the way people feel, just like, upbeat Hillsong Young and Free song is going to make us real happy, and a real somber, thought-provoking, Matt Redman song may cause us just to kind of weep in many ways because of his lyrics. And so the same thing happens with color and texture. And I just think that we as programming pastors, tech directors, media pastors, whatever, I think we become those visual worship leaders in many ways, like you have worship leaders on Sunday morning.
That's awesome. Luke, before we go here, I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
For taking the time. I cannot recommend this book enough. It's just a great book.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate your time and devotion and heart to the ministry. And before we go, tell me first, how can people buy your book?
Yeah, I mean, it's on iTunes and Amazon. So all you have to do is search Environmental Projection. You can also go to triplewidemedia.com, and it's kind of the header image right now, or you can find it pretty much anywhere on there because we've kind of placed it in a couple places. But yeah, or they can hit me up on any of the social media platforms, Luke McElroy on Twitter or on Instagram, and or they can find me on Periscope. I Periscope every once in a while. I'm not good at it, but
well, just so you know, all this information is going to be below here, the video, on the blog, all the links to the book and everything. Awesome. Tell us a little bit about SALT.
Yeah, so the SALT conference, it's coming up in October, and this will be our 4th year. And it's just this incredible gathering of creative guys like yourself, pastors, programming guys who do lighting, video, pro presenter, all that. And we just kind of carve a couple of days out to try and do a couple of things. One, we want to try and increase your creativity tenfold. I mean, we want to just blow it out of the water. And so we do that by crafting all these environments where creativity is just inspiration in the lobby. You'll see all this cool art, digital media, and all that sort of stuff, just kind of used in fun ways, just as a way to spark something. Because we think environments breed ideas, right? This is what we've been talking about all morning. But then the second way we do it is we try and do it through community, and using community, we really try and connect. There are probably many people who are watching this that don't necessarily know a ton of other people that do what they do. I was sitting in a conference once, and a guy in the room asked a panel of us, hey, where do I go to get my question answered and not be trying and sold something in the process? And I'll never forget it. The guy sitting right next to me, who's the only guy who didn't work for a company, he worked for a church. He said, do you know another person that does what you do in your community that you can call up and say, let's go do coffee, let's go do lunch? Because I think it's so easy as tech directors and pastors and people in media and the arts to become very segregated merely because of the amount of work we have to do. I mean, it's not at all intentional. It's not like you have malice towards the church that's next door. You're just so busy. It's just like, that's not the top of my priority list. Well, one of the things we do at SALT is try our best to help you connect in very kind of informal and unobtrusive ways with people that do what you do around the nation, for you to say, hey, I'm wrestling with this, volunteer issue right now, or man, this is a challenge we're trying to figure out, or well, we're trying to figure out streaming. What have you guys done? And so all these things kind of become this community aspect, and you get to kind of rub shoulders with creatives all over the world. And then the last thing, which I think is the most important thing, is it's just a chance for you to be ministered to. We do a whole lot of work all year round to try and create these meaningfully deep worship services for tech people, for worship programming pastors. I mean, you guys are working so much behind the scenes on a weekend that it's sometimes tough to kind of go into a worship space and just worship and just give God kind of your all. And so we bring in some of the most incredibly creative-minded pastors in America to just kind of pour into us spiritual truth and all that sort of stuff. We get a chance to worship kind of unhindered in many ways. And then, of course, we'll bring in creativity into that. And we just get a chance to kind of just get away and take a breath and kind of ask deep questions about our ministry and our personal faith walk. I mean, people tell me over and over, they say, Luke, what makes SALT so different is that I always feel like I walk away for something from me, not just me in the role of my church, or not just the job that I am performing in this ministry, but that you walk away as someone who is closer to God, and you've been refreshed in many ways. And so that's our heartbeat. And so that's in October. And, I hope that many of the people listening come and experience that. It's going to be incredible.
Is registrations already open?
Yeah, registration's open. And we've actually got some big announcements coming this week, which is exciting. So I don't know when this is going to land. They may have already been announced.
Well, just look below and look for the link to register to SALT, and make sure you go there. I mean, it's a fantastic experience. These guys, they have a heart for God. And I really, truly, I'm honored to be able to connect with you and have done some gigs together. and
Yeah.
work together in so many things. And we have Luke here for like 5 years now in a row, and working already on the 6th year.
Yep.
Well, Luke, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Joey.
Really appreciate your time, your devotion, your heart. And for you watching, I really encourage you to do one thing. Share this video. Share. You probably know a lot of other people that work in the same area in media, in church, or sometimes you may know somebody that don't work for a church, but it's a volunteer, and does all this service for the church. And this is for everybody, not just for church staff, but everybody involved in church media, church. And this is a resource, a great resource. And Luke is here, and I'm sure he'll be glad to connect with you through this process. But share this page, this video, with anybody you want to, and get the word out. And buy the book. You're gonna be glad. I promise you're going to be glad you bought the book, and there's a lot of stuff good for you. Luke, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joey.
I'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.